It's a great pleasure to introduce Professor Luciano Floridi, who's recently come back to Oxford to take up a professorship of Philosophy and Ethics of Information. Probably the most appropriate professorship ever, since he has a book on the philosophy of information, and just last month, one on the ethics of information, among many other books. I first met Luciano when I was a first-year undergrad, and at the time...
Then it's going to be embarrassing.
You were mainly an epistemologist at the time, but even when we were doing Berkeley, you would talk about software, hardware analogies, and this was the time when I won't say when exactly, but we were all using Pigeonholes, but Luciano was already using email. I didn't even know I had an email account, so I think I missed the first two tutorials, but he was already a philosopher of information, I think. And now he's come all the way. So back to Oxford, and I'll leave it to you.
Thank you, Konstantin. The reminder that, yes, I tried to introduce email in the college system with a remarkable resistance from some of the old dons tells you quite a bit about my age. Some of you do not know how lucky we are to have that screen working. Has been, as you can tell, a miracle of technology, mainly due to the sharp mind of my wife there, who discovered that the blue thing doesn't work. So if you see that something is quite odd there, well, it is. But hopefully, fingers crossed, and patching wood and all the rest, it will work. You will see why I'm so keen, because I spent an enormous amount of time preparing this PowerPoint, way more than I should have. But not presenting it to you tonight, it would have been really disappointing. Now, before I start all this, a couple of remarks. One, which reminds us of sort of our BBC flash photography warning. There will be some scenes of conceptual violence in the following slides. So for the faintly-hearted, please stay with us. But if every now and then I'm also being recorded, I sound slightly more aggressive than I should be, that is because I cannot keep myself under control when talking about some topics. So I apologize in advance if any of you has the impression that I'm being polemical. The impression is justified. The second point is that if you had, speaking of BBC, if you had a look at BBC technology on a regular basis, say, the last week, well, you must have read that Amazon is preparing a fleet of drones to deliver your packages. So this is not science fiction, but say in 5 years we will have drones flying around to deliver your next book, assuming that there are still books. Meanwhile, Microsoft is, again, BBC News technology, nothing very mysterious. Microsoft is preparing some female underwear for wearable computers. The sort of things that, say, Tom and I wouldn't be wearing, but some of the ladies here would. At the same time, again, last week, same news, Google has shown that it has been buying up all possible startups, and is now number 7 in robotics. They have strong interest in understanding how robots can actually make a difference in business. This is not for commercial applications. If Google invests heavily in robotics, something is going on. The list goes on and on. Technology is quite amazing, and the technophile and the technophobe will simply wonder, what's next? What we're going to do today is to ask, what's behind? So I will not provide you more of the sort of examples I just gave you, because you just need to read the BBC technology column. What I'm going to try to do is to try to make some sense, and that's when your critical approach will be very welcome, of the sort of events and novelties and phenomena that we are experiencing. So this is the outline of the talk. First of all, I will provide some facts, some more general facts, not just the sort of facts that are provided right now. And then some changes that depend on those facts. And because we are in a sort of philosophy class, sort of big bold picture: time, space, and life. So time, as in described as in hyperhistory, more on this. Space as enveloping the world, more on this, and life as really on life. So with that background in place, then I will move to a bit of philosophy and describe to you, that's where the sort of conceptual violence will take place, how we should be asking philosophical questions in the 21st century, welcome to reality, and which philosophical questions we should be asking, and how we should approach philosophical questions in the first place. The violence here will be related to the fact that we should not be asking philosophers' questions, but philosophical questions. And I bet that any one of you who has been exposed to philosophy in the past 30 years knows exactly what I mean. Not philosophy for its own sake, in the ivory tower, talking about itself, to itself, but philosophy engaged with the world, which is not applied philosophy. It's a philosophy that is interacting with the world as it is now. And then some conclusions. So, the philosophy of information, why today, why it matters. So, some facts, and some of the things that you're going to see are obvious, Wikipedia level. I know that you know, you should know that I know that you know, so that you don't feel patronized, okay? The whole point is to remind you of the general picture. This is a classic, is the kind of Mona Lisa of our age, is Moore's Law, is how computers have been developing throughout the years. This is 1971, for those of you too far away, this is 2011. There's been an increase in the power of our machines of about 1 million-fold in 40 years. And there is no sort of visible limit that is coming up. So this is basically 2020. As you can tell, things are going up and up and up in terms of the power of our machines. Now, there's another picture, the next one, which is basically moving in the opposite direction. And that's how much it costs to have all that power. It costs less and less and less. And there's a Commodore 64 here, purely for biographical reasons. That's when I started. And some of you here, more or less my age, know exactly what I'm referring to. Lucky those of you who have no idea what a Commodore 64 is. But if you were basically the owner in 2010 around here, too small for some of you, 2010 around here, of an iPad 2, that is already archaeology, by the way, but an iPad 2 in 2010, well, suppose you make that iPad 2 in 2010, which could process 1,600 million of instructions per second. By the time I finish saying that, no, lots of million instructions have already been processed. Well, suppose you make that power. Think of sort of the kick that that iPad can give to your data, equivalent to $100. You pay for that particular amount of power, that horse in the iPad 2, $100. How much would it be if we were to go back in terms of cost? If you could walk back in time to have this amount of power, what would be the price? And it's quite staggering. This is the number here. There are more zeros that you can count. It's actually $100 trillion to have your iPad 2 power, 2010, in around 1950, which is in human's memory. It would have cost more than the Qatar GDP put together. And the usual joke is that only generals, US generals, understand those kind of figures. But that is exactly the sort of power that we have in our hands. And if any of you wonders, what do we do with all that power? I mean, nice to have it, but well, the thing is that most of that power, as I will show you in a moment, doesn't go into processing data for us. It goes into communication between the machines and with us. It goes into interfaces. That's why your new computer is required to run the old operating system. It's that ease of interaction, that touch and go, that is consuming endless amount of power. That's why we don't put a man on the moon with our iPhone, which has more power than the NASA had when they did that. But we can touch and simply open an app. So In all this, of course, all that power generates huge amount of data, immense amount of data. And of course, everybody in this room should be overwhelmed if anyone has a view of the amount of data available. That impression in your life that data are accumulating to a speed that is staggering, well, is fully justified. Now, again, those of you a bit too far away, this is 2009, and this is the amount of data that we have produced from 0 to 2009, from when we were in the caves painting animals on the wall until 2009. It was less than 1 zettabyte. A zettabyte is a one with lots of zeros. No. But think of that as huge, and the whole human history produced one, in fact, just slightly less than 0.8 zettabytes between the beginning of history and 2008. 2009, 0.8. By 2020, we will have 35 zettabytes. A moment of reflection on this. So we will have produced 35 times what the whole human history has generated from 0 to 2008. If that is not overwhelming, I do not know what is. It really means that this huge tsunami of data is hitting us heavily. Now, another way of saying it is actually there is a full banquet of amazing resources that we have. You don't have to eat everything as you used to. You might get used to have kind of a greedy attitude towards information. Whatever was available, you would get it. Today, that's impossible. So this huge amount of data have no really sort of visible limits in terms of further acquisitions. You can see that there are basically 3 limits to the speed of growth. This will go bigger and bigger. Thermodynamics, physics, what we can do literally with these machines, and this is a proof that physics does count. Intelligence, us, how smart we are in generating and handling and managing and squeezing and all this data. And of course, memory. Memory as in support, because all this data are somewhere. They're not up in the air, despite the cloud, but they are on physical support. And as I will show you in a moment, that physical support is very relevant. So we are more on the facts base. Now, all this data, all that processing power, all those millions of instructions per second, and all these zettabytes of data coming together, power and stuff, they generate lots of problems, normally practical problems, managerial problems, problems where you can find a job. Acquisition and storage, usability, security and safety, accessibility, analytics, law, and ethics. These are all places where any smart graduate student from here will find a job tomorrow. And it means what you do with the data, whether you can use them, the safety, NSA kind of idea of all this data, the accessibility, because you have them there but you can't use them or you can't have access to them, is pointless, and the magic art, the black art of analytics. There are no degrees in analytics at the university level yet. There will be. That is the art of squeezing information from the big data. And of course, everything is constrained by law and ethics. And at the bottom of all that, as usual, as always in life, cost. Someone has to pay for all that. You, Google, the UK, you name it. So all this is, of course, generating a huge number of headaches, which is good news for philosophers. That's where we find a job. I don't want to call your attention too much to this because we have more philosophy to do on a general level. But let me just stress the memory point, the point that I mentioned before. This diagram here, and let me just, for those of you again too far away, this is 2008, and that's roughly when the available storage, which is the bottom line, started sort of being different from the line concerning the amount of data produced. Now that scissor view is becoming wider. The space in between is a space that concerns what future generations will know about us. You know, when you were a kid, and at least in my case, you were told by your mom, in my case, that the star had that light and the light was reaching us, but the star actually didn't exist anymore. You had to travel all those trillions of millions of whatever, and wow, you could see the light, but the star didn't exist anymore. Well, in a way, that's what's happening here. The divide between the amount of memory where you put the data in the first place. Think of your smartphone. How much memory do you have there? And the amount of data you're actually generating, the number of pictures you're taking, some of which should not have been taken in the first place, or will have to be erased, or will never be recorded. Well, make this not your personal problems. Of course, you can go and buy more, but humanity as such has not been able to generate enough support for all the data we have been generating since 2008. It means that for the past 6 years, 5, we have been throwing away buckets of data. On what grounds? Nobody knows. We just decided that that was not worth saving. Now that, if anything, is already a philosophical problem. What memory gets saved, as opposed to what memory is going to be saved for future consumption. If you find this a little bit confusing, think of the following example. You have papyrus, and what you put in the papyrus is, of course, essential. Of all the information you have, something has to be saved. That papyrus is precious. You have a stone in Rome, you have to chisel that stone. I mean, surely you're going to think twice. No, word processing stones? Not yet. So once you make a mistake, that's it. No. And paper and so on. Until recently, the whole problem was, what do we save? Since computers have been around, the problem has been, what do we do? Throw away. Everything gets saved in the first place. Now, your emails, your phones, pictures, you name it. We have switched from, okay, I don't need this because I need something else to come in. But by default, you could save all your emails, you could save all your pictures. This divide here is going to cause more headaches to future historians than we can imagine at the moment. But back to facts. So this is just the background. Lots of processing power, lots of data. What's happening under our eyes? Well, time to look at time, space, and life so that we have a background on which we can do philosophy. This is not necessarily something you can find in an introduction to history. It's a bit of an innovation, but I hope it will be helpful to make sense of what's happening under our eyes. Prehistory and history is a classic distinction that you find in any introduction to history. Prehistory is defined by historians as any stage in human development. It could be yesterday. It doesn't have to be 6,000 years ago. When there is no ICT, a society doesn't have any technology, normally writing, to record the present for future consumption. Could be pictures, could be writing. In our case, in the history of this planet, it was writing, and it was 6,000 years ago. So normally, we put prehistory around 6,000 years ago, and that's when we move from prehistory to history. History is anything or any society that has that facility. If there is some small village in the middle of the Amazonian environment which doesn't have writing, doesn't have a way of recording the present for future consumption, that society today is living in prehistory. So think of this as adverbs. You live prehistorically, you live historically, or sometimes, some of us, live hyperhistorically. It's a reinforcement of the historical condition in the following sense. Here you have no ICTs. Think of writing or anything else. History is the long 6,000 years during which individual and social well-being, think of the Roman Empire, the British Empire, the US Empire, or any other empire that's forthcoming, where this well-being is related to ICT. It is something that goes hand in hand. Unless you have a way of communicating, it's very hard to think how that sort of social construction can keep up. Romans are associated to roads. The British Empire is associated to domain of the sea. I mean, it's not accidental. What happens if that screw gets another twist? More dependency on history, more dependency on ICT. Well, you enter into a hyperhistorical condition in which individual and social well-being starts being dependent on ICT. If you find this, for those of you more pragmatically oriented, a little bit too sort of philosophical, think of the following line. Today, only societies that live hyperhistorically can actually be subject to a cyber attack. A cyber attack is evidence that that society depends so much on ICT that can actually be harmed by undermining their IT infrastructure. Now that is a sign, a clear sign, that the well-being, the added value, the cherry on top of the cake, not the cake, the extra layer, is ICT dependent. Now the objection here could be, well, of course we need energy, shelter, food, obviously. The point is not that that is being replaced by ICT. The point is that all that is running the way it is because of ICT, because of logistics, because of airports, because of trains, because of traffic lights, because of hospitals, because you wouldn't even be able to pay your taxes these days, unless, etc. So everything is being, as I will tell you in a moment, wrapped around those ICTs and becoming more and more dependent on what we will be calling, in a different context, a Turing machine, a computer, somewhere, somehow. All those millions of instructions per second, all those data, are the foundations of our society and the foreseeable future. So we live in a hyper-historical context. Here is some hard facts, again, for the less abstractly oriented individuals among us. I'll give you the data and then a picture. So if the data are not clear, wait for the next slide. The next slide provides a clear picture that is way more telling. Total world wealth in 2011, $231 trillion. And in case you want to know how much that is unfair, well, that is $33,000 per person. If you have more than $33,000 per your sort of overall wealth, it means your bicycle, your account, your house, your car, well, you are part of the wrong divide. Advertisements, we paid roughly about $500 billion. Military, 1.74. Entertainment and media, for the first time in the history of humanity, 2010, we have entertained ourselves more than we have tried to kill each other. That's good news. Look at this. It's 2 trillion. It's good news. I know some of you might want to waste it. Well, I like that waste. So 2 trillion here against 174. That's what our global financial crisis does to you. You don't spend so much money on weapons. Health, as always, a big budget, is 6.5 trillion. ICTs, and that's what I want to call your attention to, 3 trillion. That's huge. Now, of course, ICT is a bit of a trick because, of course, health is related to ICT, entertainment and media is now digital, military, where do they go without their drones? Advertisement is all about Google anyway, and therefore, this, which is the 3 trillion we have spent on ICT in 2010, looks like this. And I put Sweden somewhere, so that you have a general sense. This is Sweden GDP. It's a decent country, well known for its civilized, small population. Just before is the amount of advertisement. Now, these two budgets are about the same. That's why everybody is so keen on having those cookies in your browser. It's not a small business because it's about the GDP of Sweden every year that is there as a cake to divide between Amazon and Google, Microsoft and Apple, and so on. It's quite a large cake. Next comes the military, then the entertainment, then ICT, and then health. So that's how we heavily depend on ICTs. That is a hyper-historical world for you. So, because of this transition, of course, when things change, we find ourselves conceptually wrong-footed. Now, we had a nice framework in our mind, we thought we understood what was going on, conceptually speaking, and all of a sudden things changed dramatically, we had to readjust conceptually. That's normal. It means that you will find in, again, BBC News sort of things, the hyperhistory is looked at from different perspectives, say, cyberculture. Some of you must have heard about this. Or posthumanism, or singularity, or more science fiction scenarios here. Did I say that? More science fiction scenarios here. Why are they interesting? Not because of what they are saying, because what they are saying is insane. but because they are evidence of some kind of uneasiness towards what's happening. It's like the fly hitting the glass. Clearly the fly wants to get out of the bottle. Wittgenstein reference. Clearly it's not getting out of the bottle. The fact that it's hitting against the glass, it's a bad idea. Science fiction. The very attempt is significant. This and similar sort of approaches tell us that something has been happening here. And because it has been happening, because we find ourselves not completely at ease with the sort of conceptual framework we had in the past, then we try any solution. I mean, the European Commission decides to consult a philosopher to know about the information society in the future. They are desperate. Of course, you try first the economist, then the sociologist, and bottom line, you even try a philosopher. Because, of course, I know, precisely because things are changing so dramatically, so quickly, so radically, that someone, somewhere, must come up with new ideas. So, what's happening around here is that for some kind of old-fashioned mind, someone who, for example, might be wearing a watch like this, you look at the past to understand the future, not to get stuck in the past, but to understand that maybe it's time to be a little bit more systematic, more global, more radical, more foundational. Now, foundationalism is no longer popular in philosophy. Systematicity is not longer popular in philosophy. So, for anyone who wants to do some innovative work, that's a good area. The unpopular, the unorthodox. You need basically a new philosophy of nature, because nature has changed under our eyes. Our environmentalism now includes building like this and gadgets like this stuff. It's not just about trees and valleys and rivers anymore. You need a different kind of philosophical anthropology, as I will show you in a moment. A new understanding of who we are now that we share the world with all these machines and sort of smart, quote-unquote, gadgets. You need a new political philosophy because the old arrangement, big states, France, Germany, China, dealing with the world, clearly is not working when Egypt and that particular season, or Occupy, or Anonymous are also forces around, as well as Google, Amazon, etc., or NATO, or the UN. So all this has to be reconsidered, and it has to be reconsidered from the right perspective. You can see where I'm going with this, but it will take about another half an hour or so before we get to the final line. So that was as far as time was concerned. The only thing you have to remember, time equal hyperhistory. Space. Well, space is something that we have been restructuring around our gadgets. That is the only point I want to make. There are many more that should be made. But today, the only point that I want to share with you. You take AI, and the fight between the two souls of AI, like two siblings, has been occupying our minds for the past 60 years. Not just our minds, but also our budgets. Is AI really cognitive science of some kind, trying to understand the human brain in different ways? Or is it just pure engineering? In other words, trying to find solutions that will require intelligence if done by humans, but I don't care about intelligence as long as the solution works. These two souls have been fighting each other for more than half a century. Meanwhile, we were doing something to the world to make sure that the world would adapt to whatever gadgets we have. So instead of deciding which one of the two was working, we realized that the best thing was to adapt the world to the technology, more or less. So in recent years, the world has been adapting to limited capacities of AI increasingly well, and I'd like to share with you this idea of enveloping the world, no continental philosophy involved. It's a word that comes from industrial robotics. In industrial robotics, an envelope is a technical word to describe the 3D space where a robot can successfully operate. Think of the car industry, all those lines with robots, moving pieces. Well, whatever the robot does within that 3D space, that is the envelope of the robot. Now, in the car industry, as in many other industries, including what Google is going to do with all the robots, see the introduction. In that context, you build the environment around the robot. You will be insane to unleash a robot in the environment and say, "Oh, build me a car." You are very careful to structure everything that is required for the robot to be successful. So that is what I want to call, in robotics, an envelope in our context. If you envelop the world around the technology, of course the technology is going to be successful. What does it look like? Here's a very simple example, and I'm afraid some of you have already seen this, so forgive me. Think of a dishwasher. Since my wife is here, I won't say a word about who is responsible for the dishwasher in the house. This dishwasher is a smart envelope. The box, the 3D box, is the environment that has been structured around the most stupid elementary robot you can think of. 2 bits, with a bit of soap, and you would not dream to do the dishes that way in the sink. So this is a trivial example of enveloping an environment around the robot. In different contexts, we would call this an ontology that has been wrapped or enveloped around the artificial agent. This is a stupid idea. You can see that the very sort of fancy thing that it has to be like me. It's me, God, reproducing myself and doing the dishes as I would in the sink. Unlikely to work, to the best of our understanding today, and of course the future is open, so don't quote me tomorrow, but as of today, that is unfeasible. And this is a super smart idea. This does what someone in the house is supposed to do. Takes the dishes and put them in the dishwasher. And that's what I want for Christmas, okay? Just in case my wife is around. So you can tell that whoever had this thought understood exactly what was happening. You transform the whole kitchen in an envelope, within which there's another robot enveloped, the dishwasher. And the big robot uses the small envelope to do all the work. Now, if you again think that this is just a bit too fancy, more data coming. So in the past, enveloping used to be a standalone phenomenon, like a factory or a dishwasher. In the future, or indeed, I mean, for some of us even now, enveloping is the new environment that AI finds perfectly friendly. It's a sort of infosphere within the AI, works quite nicely. And this is a picture that gets updated regularly. Is the last one that I got from the Digital Agenda for Europe. These data are collected for different reasons. I find them interesting for the enveloping thought that I just introduced. Now, these are, and I'm afraid this is really just too small, 27 countries in Europe, all of them, all populations included. That's a lot of hundreds of millions of people. And it tells you that more than 20% of the entire EU population has access, using a laptop, to the internet when is not at home and is not in the office. And if you think about it, you just wonder where the heck they are. And normally in a coffee shop, on the road, driving. Well, because you never leave the dishwasher. You're always inside the dishwasher these days. At least 20% of the European population lives, I hope you get the analogy, inside that enveloped environment. So, indeed, it's the whole world that is around you that is being transformed. More data, again, for the skeptical among you, because I see a few faces like, not quite sure. Well, this comes from Reuters, projections sufficiently reliable, but subject to revision. World population. No, sorry, time down here, 2003, 10, 15, 20. World population, 6.3 billion, 6.8, all the way down to 7.6. Connected devices. Your printer with your computer, your laptop with, say, the internet, your iPad with something else, your TV included, 500, 12.5, 25, 50 billion. It means that by the time we reach 2020, which is just tomorrow, unfortunately, for time flies, we will have more than 6.5 connected devices per human being. That includes all Africa, all China, all South America, everything else. You take all human beings, and the amount of connected devices will be almost 7 times that, billions of people. It means that if you fly from Mars on Earth and want to discuss communication, you're going to disregard that strange species called humanity, because most of the communication happens among connected devices. Ratio 7 to 1. So to remind you, and that's the picture I would like you to keep in mind for about space, envelope in the world. Grandma used to live inside the computer, she used to walk inside. That's not exactly the picture I wanted to show you, but it will come back, so I like it. But computing meant walking inside the room. The room was around you, and there was a computer. We're talking 50s. Her daughter walked out of the computer became something in front of her. And a desktop became something that is actually horizontal. That's something weird. Her granddaughter is back inside. So inside, outside, back inside. And that's the sort of dishwasher effect. What's life like in a hyper-historical, fully or progressively more enveloped world? A quick reminder, because I want to finally hit some philosophy. In all this, with all those data, all those millions of instructions per second, in an enveloped world that lives hyper-historically, and I could have just started with this sentence, but it would have made no sense, then these three phenomena, among many others, are worth highlighting. There's a blurring of the distinction between reality and virtuality, and you just need to think about the drones and those Americans to realize what it looks like. I will give you a friendlier example. There's a blurring of the distinctions between human, machine, and nature. Again, a friendly example coming. And there's a shift from the primacy of entities to the primacy of interactions, and now we are actually moving into a more philosophical context. 3 slides for these 3 ideas. This is something that you can actually buy for Christmas. It's less than £1,000 on Amazon. It's a 3D printer. I actually put this in a text, and someone was reading the text, corrected. Surely you mean 2D. No, I meant 3D, as in it prints objects. It means that the virtualization of the real is happening under our eyes. The real is becoming more and more virtual to the extent that you actually do not buy your underwear. You buy Calvin Klein. Who cares about the underwear, guys? So the top 100 brands are worth 2.4 trillion in 2012. Remember that we spend about 3 trillion on ICT? So those are the numbers that we have to keep in mind. That's way more than Sweden GDP. At the same time, we have a reification of the virtual. The virtual is becoming more and more real, concrete, something that you actually deal with. The global video game market, for example, is worth about 65 billion in 2011. And that's why Microsoft now is depending so much on the Xbox. There is a major important investment in Microsoft, to the extent that it's becoming more important than Office. The divide between what is virtual and what is not, again, machine or human. Well, this is Kathy Hutchinson. You might have seen this on the news. She's completely paralyzed, but thanks to this little gadget here that can read, quote unquote. Be careful, because the neuroscientists among us might be upset, but can actually work with her brain input. She can control a robot arm with her thoughts. That was the translation for us, the non-experts. It's called BrainGate. It was May 2012. It's already history. And you know by now that you can control drones, even. There was another picture that I didn't show you, and I'm not going to show you, where actually those drones, the Amazon drones, you can actually control them with the brain. It's getting messy. And this is the third point. Objects being slightly replaced by interactions. This is a real, I hope the picture looks sufficiently real, magic roundabout. And normally I had to explain what this is if I have to give this talk, which I just, this particular point in France. This is roundabouts in France. But we are in the right place. We invented, in this country, the very concept of roundabout. And it's one of the things that Britain exports proudly. Now, this is a magic roundabout, which of course is a roundabout made by other roundabouts. Why it is important to have the concept of roundabout in mind? For the following reason. Imagine, and I'm talking to the more philosophically minded people in the room, imagine that someone walks into the room and asks you the following question. There's a trick. Which come first, the roundabouts or the roads? And surely something like that. Of course there are roads. Like the roundabout is just an intersection of the roads. I mean, are you insane? And then the same person asks you, what comes first, objects or relations, interactions between objects? And then you find that that is a bit uneasy, because all of a sudden the roundabout roads relationship should lead you to conclude that, of course, relations and interactions come first, like the roads, and the objects are just those nodes made by the interactions and the roads coming together. So you, yourself, me, myself, that chair, this gadget is still working. They're just intersections of those forces, planes, time, space, you name it, but they're just roundabouts. What comes first is the road. What comes first is the relation, is the interaction, is not the object. And that's what we're learning slowly, as it were. There's more about this in cyberwar for those of you who want to have unpleasant example later on. So entities as roundabouts of relations and processes are becoming a little bit more popular. They used to be, of course. I mean, there's not such thing as something absurd that a philosopher has not said before. I'm actually quoting Cicero. You already knew that a long time ago. So surely some philosophers already said this. We're just becoming more acquainted with our ordinary philosophy. Now, time to do some philosophy against this huge background. And I know that I'm testing your patience, so I hope that it will be sufficiently rewarding. 3 points that I want to make. How to ask philosophical questions in this new context. Or which philosophical questions we should be asking. Not just how, but which ones. And from which perspective. So I'm not going to tell you exactly the sort of philosophy that we should be doing, but the more sort of how sort of question. First lesson. How to ask philosophical questions. That's day 1, introduction to philosophy for undergraduates. Suppose you want to buy a second-hand car, as per Peach. And suppose that you concede, you are happy to analyze information, a piece of information, as a combination of a question plus an answer. There's a trick, as always in philosophy, but it's sufficiently hidden for you to conceive this, I hope. I say, of course, yeah. Fine. So you ask the price of a second-hand car, someone tells you 5,000. What's missing is the so-called type, and the computer scientist will know what that means. For the non-computer scientist, the explanation is coming. So we said that the price of the car is 5,000, that it gets analyzed into, is the price of this car 5,000 plus a yes? The question is missing the type. What's the type? In different contexts, we will call that a level of abstraction. In this context, we call it pounds. But it could be camels, it could be euros, and it would make a difference to whatever you pay for that car. Unless I tell you, is the price of this car £5,000, that question doesn't get an answer. Now, because we are in Oxford, this could seem to be easily resolvable in the following way. A great philosopher from around the corner, Grice, had a whole theory about conversational rules or context. So of course, we are in Oxford, I'm going to buy a car, I'm asking, is the price of this car 5,000? The guy said, yes, we meant pounds. We can, indeed, take the level of abstraction at which we ask questions for granted, but that would be a dangerous risk to take. This is the schematic of the Mars Climate Orbiter that in 1999 crashed on Mars. That was $125 million of a mistake because people assumed that Grice's conversational rules were sufficient. They assumed that, of course, they were using the same metrics, and of course they weren't. In other words, Lockheed Martin was using imperial units, the NASA was using metrics. Bingo, you lost $125 million out of a simple mistake. Why? Because nobody asked the question, what is the level of abstraction at which you are asking your questions? And someone assumed that, of course, that was granted. It wasn't worth attention. It is worth attention, as we're saying here. And as I'm going to show you later on. This is the underground as it used to be. 1908. That was the map that some engineer produced for us. It was meant to repair, for people who wanted to repair the underground. It was an engineer view of the underground. And you can actually tell that the distances are different. And all the twists and turns, they tried to represent the underground. It was useless to navigate. 25 years later, that's the underground as we know it. And from that year on, every underground in the world, second export after the roundabouts, looks like this. You go anywhere from China to Brazil, and the underground will have this particular coordinates, and nobody will care about the distances, but it will be terribly useful in order to navigate from point A to point B. Why? Because it's abstract, it's concise, it's complete, unambiguous, maintainable, a long list of properties. But the whole point is that the two maps, back and forth, and back again, and forward again, they are models of the same system. It's just that they are grasping the system at different levels of abstraction. They're both okay as long as you know what question you want to answer for what purpose. If the purpose is repairment, you better know. If the purpose is traveling, that's useless. You better have a different map. So clearly, the level of abstraction at which we ask our questions today is fundamental. So what is the right level of abstraction today? This is the medal that you get if you win the Loebner Prize. The Loebner Prize is given to anyone who can produce a piece of software or machine that passes the Turing test. The Turing test will be illustrated in a moment. The whole idea is that if you have AI, then you win the medal. There are 3 medals: gold, silver, and bronze. Gold and silver are, as we speak, science fiction, and nobody's ever even come close to winning anything like gold and silver. There's a bronze medal given to anyone who can do better than any other rubbish that is being presented at that particular Loebner Prize. I was one of the judges, trust me, it's remarkable. I want to call your attention to one particular feature of this. For those of you too far away, can machine think? Some of you might have read the same question being addressed by a famous, very famous Cambridge scholar, not too many months ago, BBC Technology column. You will think, well, is that the right level of abstraction at which we should investigate whether machines are intelligent? It was published in Mind, the paper that made Turing famous among philosophers. The question, can a machine think, is, I quote from the text, it's in the library, too meaningless to deserve discussion. It doesn't get any more straightforward than that. And that's poor Turing telling us, do not ask questions that are so meaningless. So, a medal, can machine think? That's pathetic. And the scholar should have read the text in the first place, not just the medal. The point is that the Turing test fixes the level of abstraction at which we ask the right question. I'll show you the test in a moment, and this is just an example of how we should be doing philosophy today. We should be careful about the sort of interface, level of abstraction, call it perspective, whatever you like in terms of conceptual framework that makes the question answerable in the first place. This is the Turing test. You have an investigator, say you, asking questions to two different agents. One is a machine, one is a woman in the original text. And if you don't know, on the basis of a quick exchange of question and answers, which one is the human and which one is the artificial agent, well, the artificial agent has passed the test, has been able to show you that you can't spot the difference. So it's an imitation game. It's implementable, you can actually build it, is controllable, is rule-based, because you have all this exchange of question and answers, and the level of abstraction, the currency in the previous example, remember the pounds for the 5,000, is human intelligence. We have a token. We use this particular individual, he's intelligent, let's see how this other machine compares to that behind the screen. So if the machine is quote-unquote Paul Turing thinking, we don't know, but it's doing as well as the human in question. And as I said, nobody has been able to answer that particular question successfully so far. This should ring a big bell. It's not very different from what Kant had already done a long time ago. When Kant approaches the four antinomies, and I'm talking now to the philosophers, he's doing pretty much the same. He's saying, this antinomies is time, for example, discrete or continuous. Well, these are questions that should not be asked in absolute terms, because absolute terms generate absolute mess. We're never going to get this right unless you tell me within which framework those questions are answered. And if you find that a little bit too tricky, well, that's good philosophy for you. I mean, it doesn't provide endless debates for endless jobs in philosophy, true, but it does provide some answers. And if you are after the answers, not after the pleasure to play that conceptual game, then you should be careful about the level of abstraction. Of course, there are other issues about discrete or continuous nature of reality. Is reality granular or not, etc. For those of you interested in knowing how Kant dealt with that, I recommend this classic. So the first lesson is that there is a lot to be said about the level of abstractions and how to ask philosophical questions. The other two lessons will be shorter, don't worry. Here is a text that reminds us that this is crucial to do philosophy today. Again, I read it for those of you a bit too far away. The very notion of an object at all, concrete or abstract, is a human contribution. Science ventures its tentative answers in man-made concepts, perforce couched in man-made language, but we can ask no better. The very notion of object, of one and many, remember the roundabout example, is indeed as parochially human as the parts of speech. To ask what reality is really like. Some kind of italics in your voice. However, apart from human categories, is self-stultifying. It is like asking how long the Nile really is, apart from parochial matters or miles or meters. It's like asking the ultimate price of the car, but don't give me those pounds in euros in the first place. Well, I can't give you the price unless I speak euros or pounds. I can't tell you whether the machine is intelligent or not unless I compare it to something that I know is intelligent. I can't tell you whether reality is in itself discrete or not. And no chance with the Nile. Now, for those of you, here's the trick. You think, oh, this must be French philosophy. Surely this is a little bit wacky. It isn't. This is quiet. This is the most empirically minded, stubborn, anti-anything they can possibly pick up in contemporary philosophy. Died recently. So it's not coming from some kind of va-va-voom sort of idea in Paris. It's coming from someone fully acquainted with science, knowing exactly that unless we have a level of abstraction in place, we're not going to do good philosophy. So, why the philosophy of information matters? Because it provides the right level of abstraction and conceptual vocabulary, which I will tell you in about a few more minutes, I hope, looking at the watch. That is the informational level. Lesson number 2, and we're done with the most difficult one, so bear with me. 2 more points, but they get lighter as we move ahead. So if asking philosophical questions today is to ask first and foremost, what is the level of abstraction at which we're dealing here? Because otherwise, it's just the usual mess. Well, suppose we have a level of abstraction that is actually satisfactory given a particular purpose. What kind of questions should we be engaged with? I would like to refer to philosophically minded gentleman, not as much as Steve Jobs, but Bill Gates could probably count. This is a talk that he gave MIT on the 23rd of April 2010, and again, for those of you too far away, I quote, "Are the brightest minds working on the most important problems? Improving the lives of the poorest, improving education, health, nutrition." It's not there. But of course we could carry on. And it's me, no longer Bill Gates, improving peaceful interactions, human rights, environmental conditions, living standards. The things that outside academia we really think are fundamental, where we need the best and brightest to make a difference. This is someone who has made a difference in industry, of course, and is making a difference now in social conditions. So we just wonder, what? I feel uneasy here. I'm a philosopher. How can I help? Should I be doing some applied philosophy? No. There is a way. So clearly the brightest philosophical minds should not be an exception. Shame on anyone who thinks, well, I can actually take advantage of the taxpayers' money to do a very important study on something that nobody in his right mind would ever care about but my mom. No, that is not something that we should be paying for. Especially one, that we don't have much money. So, End of philosophy? Not quite. Close down philosophical departments, as they suggest in Australia? Well, that's a bad idea. So never corrupt the brightest youths? Again, a bad idea. Because it'll be like burning the wicker basket, no, because our hot air balloon is descending too quickly. Oh, we need to be lighter up in the air. Burn our foundation, so we will go up. That is not smart. So surely that's not the road. But what is the middle ground here? So philosophy is what you need to keep in a good world, not what you want to get rid in a bad one. In more memorable sort of single line, Athens is a better place with Socrates, no, without. But surely something has to be found in terms of a compromise. It can't be just ivory tower, but it cannot be also, well, applied philosophy for Google. So something in the middle has to be found, and that is the engagement that I started with at the beginning of this talk. Philosophy cannot be obsessed with itself. It has to engage with the real world as a discipline, as a philosophical analysis and synthesis. That is the middle ground that towards the end of the slides I hope you will be convinced about. So again, second lesson, they're still focusing on which philosophical questions we should be asking. Now, clearly today, ICTs have changed communication, education, work, entertainment, business, economy, politics, healthcare, social relations, conflicts, and I'm sure you can add more items there. So ICTs are behind the most important problems, and surely Bill Gates knows something about this. So behind all these most important problems, there is ICT. Well, in a global information society, the most important problems, those mentioned by Bill Gates, are linked to understanding and designing ICTs. These are the challenges that the brightest philosophical minds can tackle. It's basically looking at the most fundamental problems, realizing what the sources and roots are, and trying to contribute to understanding and shaping those roots. So if someone wonders, well, but these are not the flowers, the plant. Well, yes, they are just the roots. But if we take care of the roots, philosophically, the flowers will flourish. And although it's a few steps remote from the actual sort of output, it is a contribution to how society can improve in the future. It is not philosophy about philosophy for philosophy. So second point, why the philosophy of information matters? Because it addresses the most important and pressing questions today, those that are ICT related. Anything else, I find suspicious. Final point. How to approach philosophical questions. So how we ask them, what kind of questions, and how we get to those questions. So ICTs and their philosophical issues are part of a wide and influential revolution in the big process of a reassessment of our fundamental nature, of who we are and our role in the universe. They are part of a longer string of revolutions. And again, I apologize for the 2 or 3 of you who have already heard this before in previous meetings we had. Suppose we really simplify and we speak about knowledge, science, technology in general, as something that changes our understanding in 2 fundamental ways. One is trivial, it's about the world, of course, now you know more. But it's not just the extrovert, it's not just about the world, it's also introvert, it's about ourselves. And I'm not talking about psychology or anthropology or sociology, I'm saying just normal science of non-human related stuff. By telling a story about the world, ends up telling a story about ourselves. This is something that was put together before, I'm just reporting it from the textbook. 3 revolutions. Copernicus changed how we understand the universe and indirectly changed our self-understanding. By understanding we're not immobile at the center of the universe, we certainly changed our anthropology. All of a sudden, oops, we were in a more difficult position. That comfortable centrality was removed. We retrenched and we decided that, well, our centrality was really biological. We were at the center of the biological space or game. And then Darwin came and made us realize, on this side of the Atlantic at least, that we're not unnaturally detached and diverse from the rest of the animal world either. So the centrality of the universe had to be given up, the centrality in the biological universe had to be given up. We retrench, in a way, in a sort of centrality in the Cartesian mind. It was something that we used to discuss as Saint-Hans, Berkeley and all the other guys. There was a view before Freud that we were Cartesian subjects, as in people who could look in their minds like looking into a shoebox. You know exactly what's there and what isn't. Thinking is introspection and is fully transparent. Freud comes and kicks us out of that central space as well. There's more going on in our minds that we are aware of. We were left with one extra space, another space where we thought we were king of the game. And that was the space of information, the infosphere. We thought that, well, when it comes to intelligent tasks, when it comes to solving problem A to get solution B to go to C, we are the masters, nobody else, no one else. We just compete among each other. Not even animals can do what we are doing. But of course, that is the fourth revolution that I like to share with you as an idea. Cambridge men, so be it. Alan Turing, the computer revolution, and all of a sudden we realize that we're not disconnected agents, not single individuals on single islands, but we are really informational organisms interacting with other informational agents, and sometimes these information agents do things better than us. They land that plane better than us, and if it is bumpy, that's because the pilot has to land a few planes every now and then. They play chess better than us. They're probably going to deliver packages better than us. So they can do better than us in most cases. They're not more intelligent than us, but they are there in the same space. Our centrality, our uniqueness had to be given up. So this is the perspective from which I think we can approach philosophical questions in general. So why the philosophy of information matters? Because it approaches the most important and pressing questions from the right perspective, one which is informed by the fourth revolution. So, conclusions. Quick list. Again, for those of you too far away. New realities, unprecedented phenomena, new experiences, powerful tools and methodologies, a wide range of unique problems and conceptual issues. Many opportunities have been unimaginable so far. This is what we're seeing now with all the big data and big power in our computers. All that has affected already what we do philosophically in most cases, at least implicitly. What philosophers do, how they think about their problems, what problems are considered worth their attention, how the solutions are designed and conceptualized, the intellectual vocabulary that we use. Think of philosophy of language, philosophy of mind, ontology, epistemology, have all been shaped by this revolution. So, what I'm suggesting is that we do need some fresh air in the stuffy room that is philosophy. We have, as we speak, new philosophical approaches, original investigations, crucial and unprecedented questions, and new interpretations of classic problems and of traditional topics. Well, basically, we are doing, or we should be doing, this sort of philosophy of information as the next step in understanding the world. Not everybody will agree with this, so for those of you who don't know much about philosophy, take it as controversial. I think it's absolutely right, of course, because I came up with this conclusion, but I'm aware that some people might actually disagree. One way of looking at philosophy is as conceptual design, maybe because I'm Italian. But it's the idea of engineering concepts and putting concepts together. We don't deal with bricks or gears. We deal with concepts as entities, and we shape them, structure them, reshape them, put them together, do everything from scratch, build and unbuild, and that's what you do in good philosophy. You never ever do thinking about someone else thinking. That is blood-sucking that we teach our undergraduates. That's a different topic. When you do real philosophy, you do philosophy about concepts and problems and solutions, and you're trying to find the right sort of engineered construction that provides a solution for that particular issue. So philosophy as conceptual design creates and evaluates. It's a creative process, not just analysis. Explanatory answers for questions that are open to disagreement. That's the difference between science of the mathematical or the experimental kind. If your question can be answered by a proof or by an experiment or a combination of the two, there is no philosophy, no matter what the philosophers are telling you. There could be mathematics, it could be logic, it could be neuroscience, but it's not the sort of philosophy that we are engaged with. We engage with open questions, questions about which, if you and I disagree, it does not mean that we are disinformed, irrational, or stubborn. We can be informed, rational, and willing to exchange views, and yet disagree about whether we should or should not have a party on Saturday. That is a philosophical question. Or what you do for Christmas. Of course, they escalate to more important things, but that's the point. So once you have this view, then philosophy is not a timeless enterprise, but it's a timely one. It's an enterprise that deals with an engaged reality and addresses questions that are of some importance to whatever happens outside the ivory tower. So it's timely, not timeless, and when questions change, philosophy evolves. That's why we don't do philosophy like the Middle Age used to. Coming to a conclusion, so philosophy as conceptual design can be very helpful. It forges and refines new ideas, new perspectives and insights, the intellectual framework that is needed to deal with the most important problems. So it's not true that we cannot join forces with those who are actually dealing with the most important problems. It's just that for every soldier in the front line, you need 6 behind. That's the normal sort of average in the army. So don't think that just because philosophers are not in the trench, they are useless. You need all the logistics, all the conceptual work that is required for that soldier to be successful. So someone has to do the hard, difficult work on the front line. Or, in a gardening context, deal with the flowers. Just because you are under the sort of radar, you are dealing with the roots, it doesn't mean that those are irrelevant. The sort of conceptual design that we need today is, of course, the philosophy of information, as I tried to convince you. And that is required in order to deal with some of the most important problems of our time. And because you need a definition at a certain point, and this is the conclusion, here is a quick synthesis of what the philosophy of information looks like. On the one hand, we need the philosophy of information as the critical investigation of the conceptual nature and basic principles of information, including dynamics, utilization, and sciences. It's just thinking of philosophy of information as epistemology, but based on information rather than knowledge, or aesthetics, but not on beauty and ugliness, but etc. So we do philosophy of information in a sort of classic way. It's just that a new wave of what philosophy should look like. At the same time, we need the philosophy of information as the elaboration and application of information theoretic and computational methodologies to philosophical problems. Think of this as the way back from the computer science department. You go to the computer science department to do your work, and you come back with ideas to do some philosophical work in return. And since it would be pointless to end a whole long lecture like this without mentioning Plato, since every philosophy, no matter what you do, is a footnote, as you know, Whitehead, and etc., to Plato, here are 2 slides. First, all I've said could be synthesized into a knower, someone who knows these days, is from Cratylus, the man who knows how to ask and answer questions at the right level of abstraction. That's the little thing that we need to add to dear Plato. And finally, the sort of knowledge we require is that in which there happens to be a union of making and knowing how to use the thing made. And what is the thing made most popular, most common today, if not information? Thank you.